Sunday. It's brunch time. We're early. We're the Brothers Sisters. Early on a Sunday. It's brunch time. Drink a coffee in my t-shirt with a skeleton and some Halloween stuff.
So actually,
I can do that for an hour.
I should have some Halloween stuff out, and I don't. I'm mad at myself because I was going to, but I did.
Yeah, Ann. It's Spooktoberfest. Where's your Spooktoberfest finery for crying out loud?
I'll be right back. I have one right here.
Okay, so I'm going to have to hold the fort while Ann puts on her Spooktoberfest. So we'll make commentary about Ann's house right now. You can see her cat in the background. Oh, there she's got the Spooktoberfest cat. That's cool. Where'd you get that?
CVS.
Okay.
I went in there to get my... What?
Yeah. Why is it the drugstores have the funnest stuff, if that's a word?
I know.
Dude, I'm like, that's the best reason to go into a Walgreens is to go to the aisle of seasonal crap because it's always so fun. Look at that.
I know. It was
nice.
It was awesome. I was there to get some sort of I think I was there to get my a booster of something, and I was like, "Oh, I'm getting a shot. I deserve spooky skeleton kitty." And I was gonna have it dancing and stuff. But last night we went to a wedding, and it was super fun. The reception was super fun, and I danced. I didn't even drink. But we danced and danced and danced, and man, we got home at like 11:30, which for Duncan and I is like 3:30 a.m. Thursday morning. So, man, I am rough this morning. I'm rough. And I didn't even drink. I got like my feet hurt, my hips hurt, my thigh, everything hurt. And I couldn't think very well. I keep like walking around. I'm like, I didn't even drink. What's wrong with me?
You are sleep deprived. Well, don't worry, Ann, because we'll just take it slow today. We'll take it slow when we talk about. We won't go too fast. I won't talk too loud, even though you didn't drink. You want to know the truth? I was a little bit rough yesterday from us going out to and have drinks on. You know what it was? It was that shot that Hannah, the bartender, bought me. That put me over. It was like having that third old fashioned, which is the thing you never do. So yesterday I was feeling a little bit rough. So I finally worked it out. I went and mowed the neighbor's lawn yesterday, and that helped me kind of work it out because I got a little bit warm, sweated it out a little bit, and that seemed to do the trick. So
yeah, no, that was so funny. I was telling Duncan, I said, Duncan, Jenny and I were at the bar, and we're sitting there eating our salads and having our thigh wings and drinking a drink. And this woman buys Jenny a shot. I was like, hello, am I invisible? I'm like, why are you buying my sister/wife a shot, bitch? What? I was like, damn.
It's because okay, so Beer Exchange is one of my go-to places, and it's kind of my happy place because A, the food is so good there, and B, they make a really great drink called the Toronto, which is a whiskey-based drink, which I like. And, I go there probably once every couple of weeks, when I'm feeling, because I've been by myself essentially for the last 6 months. So while my husband is away doing other things. And so sometimes it's just nice. I'll go there on like a Thursday evening or something because Thursday is bar night. And Hannah is often the bartender there. And in our conversations, she is becoming a teacher. So we've had lots of teacher talk stuff. So and so she was there on Friday night. It looked like she was having her end of shift dinner or something like that. And at one point I just kind of gave her a nod. She gave me a nod. And then, about 15 minutes later, Austin, the bartender, brings over a shot. And she's like, hey, this is Hannah wants to buy you a shot of Makers. And I was like, cool. So I ended up putting it in my second old fashioned. And then I was like, yeah, I probably won't drink the rest of this old fashioned. And then I did. It was an eventful night because then, so like we're sitting there at the bar, and then I was going to talk about the angry guy that I gave obvious side eye to, that we walked away after I gave him obvious side eye because he was being a complete dick. So anyway,
yeah.
So yeah, it's been an action-packed week for both of us. Obviously, we haven't even gotten to talk about the fact that we're going to talk about book stuff today. So,
exactly.
But no, this is my favorite. This is my favorite Halloween T-shirt that I have. It's a big moon with it's orange and it's got a skeleton of a dinosaur on it. So obviously, I'm also because we're talking about books today, I'm wearing my National Writer Series hat. So I am ready. I have a cup of coffee instead of booze today because it's a brunch time talk. So, there you go.
Exactly. So.
And yes. Yeah. All right. So shall we do you want me to do the synopsis today since you are
you
feeling a little rough?
Since I'm a little rough. I love
You're a little rough.
I picked all black kitties this week. I love black kitties.
Right on. So Joe Vieta, I just want you to know we heard your feedback about our PowerPoints, and don't
Mhm.
worry, changes are coming. But for the time being, that was good
Mhm.
feedback, by the way.
Yeah.
And so I talked to. I'm just going to give you a quick history. I'm going to put our shining faces back on. I talked to my cousin Joe Vieta, who lives out in Colorado, who is one of our regular listeners, as it would turn out,
Hey,
and
Joe.
who I value, whose opinion I value
Mhm.
very much.
Yes.
Made some great points about our format and what he wants to see from us, and I think it's awesome because we are here for our fans and we are here for our listeners and viewers, and we want to make it bigger, better, and so we relish your feedback to make this. You know, we've evolved quite a bit since our beginnings back in 2020, and we want to continue to evolve and make this fun and entertaining for our listeners slash viewers. So that's what we're all about. So Joe, just so you know, we heard your feedback. We're going to stick with the format. We're coming up on our 50th episode. So we're planning on doing some changes,
Mhm.
not huge changes, just some format changes when we get to our 50th episode. So, just want you to know, herd chef, let's
Sure.
go.
Let's go. Sorry, I've got a black kitty like scratching me to pet him, so I was like, I might be going, ow, ow, because he loves you with his nails
That's cat love. Cats love you with by hurting you. It's
and by
amazing.
hurting you.
So,
Exactly.
yes. So, all right. Fun fact: we are the brother sisters. I am Janice Brothers. With me is my sister Ann Brothers. It's not a fake. Our last name is not AI generated. It is our last name. We are the
Mhm.
brother sisters. Huzzah! All right. So we are in our 50s, which means we are Generation X, which is coincidental that we are Generation X, but it's not coincidental in the fact that that is what has shaped who we are and how we do our business. It also means that we basically grew up being educated by Schoolhouse Rock, and it's how we learned the rules of grammar.
It was
Grammar
a
matters,
hairy
people.
bear. It was a
He was a
scary bear.
scary bear.
I made a hasty retreat from his lair, and I pulled out my
My
adjective.
adjectives, bloop, bloop, bloop. Yeah,
That's how I learned what a noun was: person, place, or thing. So
verbs, conjunctions. I had no
things
idea what a conjunction was until conjunction
conjunction,
junction. What's your
junction, what's
function?
your
Hooking
function?
up words and phrases and clauses. Yeah, I know. I get it.
Mhm,
Yeah, interjection, which is my favorite one
mhm.
because you know, it's the reason I say rats all the time is my way of disgust, or I'm like rats. That's because of interjection. So there you go.
Mhm.
All right, so now you know, and not only that, but Schoolhouse Rock also taught me about the law, bills and
Oh
all
yeah,
that.
bills.
Uh, so as you can see, as what we do, we talk about smart stuff, dumb stuff, fun stuff, or any combination of the three. We are because we are in our 50s. We also could be accused of not being cool, hip, or sexy. And we know this because we will ask questions.
Mhm,
Pestily
mhm.
so. Like if I'm at a training, I'm the one that's raising my hand. I'm like, well, what about this? What about this? There's something I don't understand here. I'm not afraid of sounding dumb because if I don't ask, I won't know, and then I will be the dummy in the room.
Mhm.
So we ask questions, and it's the same way.
I am the exact
Uh,
same way. If no other, because one, I don't want to find out that I'm doing it wrong later, and two, I want to find out how dumb the person that's teaching me is, so that I can make fun of them later while they when they don't know.
so we basically just summed up who we are as people, and just gave you her reason for asking questions, and I gave you mine. There you go.
There you
Okay.
go. I use mine as ammunition. I ask questions
Uh,
to gather ammunition against you.
so Anne, do you think would you go so far as to say that you use your powers for evil and I tend to use mine more for good?
I wouldn't say I use mine for evil. I use mine for advantage.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair.
Yeah,
Okay, I'll
it's
buy
like,
that.
well, it's funny because I'll bring this back to I have dyslexia, and I learned how to get as much information as possible to want A, to learn, and to B, to hide that I was dyslexic. And so I often looked for whatever I could find on anybody, because that would be either I could use it to help me learn, or I could use it to help distract from the fact that I wasn't learning. So that's why
Smart.
I always asked questions, because I was looking for all the ways, not just like an answer, but all the ways to try to figure out to navigate my environment. So that's what I used
No,
it as an advantage. I was using it to give myself an advantage. So that's why.
gotcha.
Mhm.
All right, that makes sense. Yeah.
Mhm.
Let me see what else. Our podcast is great to listen to when you want to learn things about stuff, and because we are guilt-free to listen to. We're guilt-free. We'll make you feel good. We're not going to make you feel bad like a murder podcast.
Yeah.
Right now, I was talking to my friend Tara last night, who is obsessed with the Menendez Brothers podcast that's going on right now. Because
Oh.
they're a thing. The Menendez brothers are back in a big way, so that's the big podcast that's happening. We're not like that. I'm not going to talk about the Menendez brothers, even though I did start watching the series on Netflix, and it is cheesily addictive. Ugh,
Oof.
it's poorly produced, and so watchable.
I wasn't that interested in the case. I remember when it was going on in the first edition, like when they
Right,
were actually
right.
being tried. And I wasn't that interested before. I was like, so I didn't pay attention then. So I honestly, I have no idea other than that they were accused of killing their parents and convicted of killing their parents. So,
Well, they actually admitted to it, and what it
oh,
ended up the trial, and this is one of the things that I had forgotten is that they did admit to it. And they pleaded self-defense because of the abuse of their parents, which is the thing that, there's a lot of people that are revisiting the case that
mhm,
maybe they shouldn't have been convicted. I don't know.
mm,
I wasn't there. I just know I was so distracted at the time by the OJ trial that I kind of
mhm,
missed the Menendez, because it was in California. You're like,
right,
I can only take one sensational trial at a time. Thanks
exactly.
very much.
Yeah.
So, one more thing about our podcast that you should know: this is not a PG-13, PG, or G podcast. We will drop F bombs, A bombs, S bombs, combinations of those bombs.
Mhm,
So if you've got little ones at home, earmuff them because we're probably gonna say things like "fuck." There, I just did. I got it out of the way. So
mhm,
anyway, please join us on Spotify, Amazon, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio. You can catch us there. We would love it if you would follow us, like the podcast, tell
mhm,
friends, neighbors, family, and all that sort of good stuff to please like the podcast as well, because that's how we're going to get listeners. That's how we're going to make our stuff better. That's how we're going to get you free swag. All that stuff is true. So we would love it if you followed us and did all that.
mhm,
Again, you can find us on all the big streaming services: Spotify, Amazon Music. Alexa knows our name. She knows that we're a thing. So,
mhm.
you know,
Exactly.
yeah, there you go.
Mhm,
All right. So, one of the things that we always do is we always take a little time to talk about things that are dumb, fun, or smart that we encountered this week. Of course, we've spent the first 15 minutes of our show today talking about a bunch of smart, dumb, fun stuff. Let's continue and tell us about your smart, dumb, fun thing.
Oh, well, I did a smart thing this week. Duncan and I went and saw the play Thirst by Franklin Doyle at Williamston Theater. And it's a dark comedy, and it starts out a dark comedy and it just ends dark, 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 dark. But it was very good, very thought provoking. It takes place in the near future when the Great Lakes have been uh, damaged basically beyond repair by an oil spill, and then
Oh.
how this company creates a pill that you take in order to keep you from dehydrating and dying. And only the most wealthy people can drink water.
Mhm.
So,
Wow.
yeah. So
God, that sounds
it's
yeah, wow.
yeah. So, but saying that it's a dark comedy is there's
An
some
understatement.
an understatement, yeah, but
Yeah.
it's very thought provoking. Our friend Tony Caselli directed it. We talked with Tony a couple months ago. So if you want to listen to Tony Caselli talking about the Williamston Theater, small professional regional theater in Michigan. It's a great interview to go back and listen to. That's in our archives. But we went back and we went and saw this play, and it was totally worth it. And it's still going on. If you would like to see this play, it's only it's less than 90 minutes. It's no intermission, so you're not sitting there all night or anything. It's very thought provoking and well performed. So you don't even realize by the time you're done with it, you're like, oh man, it's done already. So it's a really, really good show. Thirst by Franklin Doyle, Williamston Theater. Something smart to do.
Love it.
Mhm,
And I'm just gonna take a second to plug these small regional theaters.
mhm,
Um, a lot of people, their experience with theater is if they're only going to see some sort of big production on Broadway or a
mhm,
travel or touring company show. This is a which can be somewhat inaccessible, especially when it comes to cost. So if you're
mhm,
looking for really good live theater, and I think live theater is such an excellent experience. This is affordable, it's reasonable, it's professional theater, so these people are at
mhm,
the top of their game. I can't, so Williamson Theater is a great example of a really wonderful local small regional theater. Check it out. So
Mhm.
there you go.
Indeed.
Huh, nice. All right. So for me, I went with something dumb, and I went with Bowen Yang as Moo Dang on Saturday Night Live because I can't stop watching it. So for those of you that are unfamiliar with Moo Dang is the baby pygmy hippo from Thailand at the Thailand Zoo, and the internet has basically been obsessed with this little juggernaut hippo.
Mhm.
And last week, Saturday Night Live had their debut episode, maybe it was the week before, and
Mhm.
Bowen Yang, who was one of my favorite regulars on Saturday Night Live, was dressed up as and basically, interpreting Moo Dang for us, and it was epic. So
Oh, so funny. Hose water. Ah! So,
so
so funny.
now I realize that Saturday Night Live. It's so funny to listen to people give feedback about Saturday Night Live and how it hasn't been funny in 50 years and blah blah blah. And I think anybody that thinks that is just it lacks. I don't know. There's a lot of really great funny stuff. It's just that the humor gets younger as we get older, and as a result of that, I actually think Saturday Night Live is much funnier than it used to be. I watch
Mhm.
the old clips of Saturday Night Live, and I'm like, I don't think it's that funny, but
Mhm.
time and place, and so
Right.
I really feel like it still stays relevant, because they keep evolving with the times. It's
Mhm.
very much a show about the times that we live in. So I think
Mhm.
Saturday Night Live is still great. It's still funny. I think the cast is fantastic. They're in their 50th year this year, which is, amazing. And I just think yeah, it's still great, and I would highly recommend. It's great. They have a really great channel now on YouTube. So if you miss it, because 11:30 again, like Ann, it's like what 11:30 at
What?
night? Give me a break. That what's that?
Exactly. I was like, as soon as it got
So
dark, I'm going to
it
bed.
is bedtime. So you can always catch Saturday Night Live on YouTube because there's a lot of funny stuff.
Mhm.
So good job. All right, Ann Brothers.
Yes.
We have fooled around long enough.
Mhm.
So let's talk about our top 5 scary books to help you really appreciate the Halloween season. Now, Ann, I just want you to know right now that I went through and I changed the formatting for all of our slides.
I saw
So,
that.
well, and that's because regional manager Joe Peters said we should be doing that. That when we have any sort of top 5, top 10, top list, we should be doing a reveal on our slides. And I was like, dude, regional manager said so. When Joe
Okay.
Peters, regional manager, talks, we listen. See all these feedback, all these Joes in our life that are giving us positive and helpful feedback. Uh, so Anne, would you like to go first?
I would love to because I love horror movies and scary books, and I dedicate the end of September through October into the first week in November to scary literature. So
Okay.
let's talk about it. So
All right.
I have a huge list of books, but my number five top scariest five books for me right now is The Stand by Stephen King. And this is one of his very earliest books. It was published in 1978, and I read it when I was in my 20s. So I read it when I in the 1990s, early 1990s, and it was the first time I read a book where I'm sitting there reading a book. And I was actually at a rehearsal for a play, and I was like getting ready to get. So I was reading. My cue was coming up. I put the book down. I stood up to get into character for my cue, and I heard somebody cough, and I was like, it brought me right back to the book because the book is about a disease, a virus that's been altered for war purposes that has escaped its lab. And the first thing it starts is with people coughing. And so I heard somebody cough, and it just brought me right back. I was like, oh my gosh, this is, it made it real for me. And that was the first time a horror book had ever done that for me. And I've read it a couple times. Uh, some of the some of the writing of it is a little dated, but the story is timeless. So if you're interested, and it's a big, thick, juicy, by the pound book, they sell this book by the pound. So if you haven't read Stephen King's The Stand, get the full version, not the edited version, get the big version. And boy, it
Unabridged.
will, yeah,
Yeah,
unabridged.
he'll
Thank
mess you
you.
up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it will mess you up. It will mess you up. So Anyway, so and that has stayed with me. I mean, I read this book when I was like literally 30 years ago, and it's still in my top 5.
Nice.
The next one, this is a new one for me, Head Full of Ghosts. I read this last year. And actually, I listened to it on Audible, and as soon as I was done, I listened to it again. That's how good it was. I am usually not interested in stories about possession. I think they're boring. I think they're usually pulled out too long. But this one caught me. I heard a review about it on NPR, and the reason why I read it is because this book is about a young woman of 14, no, she's in high school, so she's about 15 years old, who is supposedly possessed, and her parents don't have the money to get her the care she needs, and so it becomes a reality TV show.
Oh, what?
Yeah, this and that's what hooked me. And I was like, it talks, it's mental illness, how we don't fund healthcare, um, how our obsession with watching televised train wrecks. Just it's a hard book. I will tell you this: it's a hard book, and but it is fascinating, and it stays with you. So this is a new one for me: Head Full of Ghosts by Paul Tremblay. Excellent book. I would probably have ever chosen it if I hadn't heard a review about it on NPR. So very good book.
NPR, that's usually my go-to place. If I want to find a book, I will
Hmm.
usually go to National Public Radio, their website, and
Hmm.
find out what they're saying because they have never let me down.
Yeah. This is another one I heard about from the same article last year, The Rovers by Richard Lang. And this is a vampire story. It's set in the 1970s. And if I was if I was ever a literature professor, I would teach this book alongside of Mice and Men, because it's about two men who are brothers who are traveling together, and they are both vampires, and how they navigate the world as basically displaced people. And there are other vampires in the book who live the same life. You can't, because of the way they live, they can't stay any place for very long, because then they'll be figured out. So it talks about being unhoused. It talks about survival. It's the undocumented, only they do it in the form of vampires. And it's a really good book. And I would literally do these two stories together, of Mice and Men and The Rovers, because they are very close in the story that they're telling about being on the fringe. So
On the fringe
excellent
of
book.
life, yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Excellent story.
Love
So
it.
that's my number 3. So both of these are fairly recent. My number 4, or my number 2, is World War Z: An Oral History of the Zombie War by Max Brooks. And I love anything written as an oral history. I just really enjoy that. In fact, my last 2 books are kind of written as oral history. So World War Z: An Oral History of the Zombie War by Max Brooks. And the interesting thing about this is that this takes place 10 years after the zombie war. So it's more about humanity than it is about zombies. But uh, this book makes me cry. Like almost after every oral history, I almost want to cry after every single one, because there's so much humanity. These stories are so human. And Max Brooks wrote all of these stories with the zombie as the villain, but he's actually writing about things that actually happened during wars. And instead of making it and just making the villain the zombie, all of this tragedy, all of these events have happened in the past. He's just bringing them, reminding us of them, and he's using zombies to do it. So if you want a
Dude is
really
such
good
a
book,
good writer.
yeah, if you want a
Yeah.
really good book about humanity and this and how we survive in good and in bad, this is an excellent example of it. So this is and this came out in 2006. So we're coming up on 20 years on this one.
Yeah, that's
Great
crazy.
story.
And this is one of my favorite books ever. Just,
Hmm.
it didn't make my scary book top 5, but this is probably one of my top 3 books that I've ever read. I love it
Hmm.
so much.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just rave about this book. And like you said, that's the part that gets you, is the humanity portion of it. To me, it's not a scary book in the sense that the zombies aren't scary. Everything else in it is scary. So
Mhm. Exactly.
nice. Mm,
Exactly. And then my number 1 is The Testaments by Margaret Atwood. And Duncan was asking me, my husband Duncan was asking me about my top 5. And when I said that The Testaments was my number 1, he's like, most people wouldn't consider that a horror book. And I'm like, and I said, if you have a uterus, it's a horror story.
yeah.
So I come back to this book 2 or 3 times a year. And I read The Handmaid's Tale when it first came out. I've read The Handmaid's Tale a number of times. That made it onto my honorable mention list. It did not make it into my top 5. Again, what I really enjoy about this book is that it gives me a broader picture of the world. The Handmaid's Tale is told from the perspective of one woman. This is told from the perspective of 3 different women who are affected by in this community. And oof, man, oh man, is this the story is fantastic. It's terrifying. You don't know. Actually, as it ends, you're hopeful that it will have a happy ending or a positive ending, but you're not positive
Mm,
because
yeah.
it's the world. And even
Because
when
we're
everything,
terrible at remembering terrible things.
well, not only are we terrible at remembering, and even when we have
Mm,
all the information, we still might not make the best decision.
truth.
So,
True
and
that.
it's about, this is about a world controlled by men, brought down by women. So,
Yep.
it's fascinating. It will stay in your head always. You'll come back to it. You'll wonder where, if you were in this place, where you fit. And that's the thing about both the Testament, World War Z, and The Stand, is that you're reading it wondering where you would fit if you were in this story. And I think
Right.
that's a very powerful thing. And you do the same thing for these. So,
Nice.
so that's my
Yeah.
5.
Okay, excellent 5. We do cross paths on a couple of these books and brothers,
Okay.
so there we go. We'll talk about that in a second. All right, so my top 5 scary books, and I was a little bit all over the place in my books, so I'm going to start with this one right here. I did some nonfiction on this because I truly believe that that what happens in the world is scarier than the stuff that we even write about. I picked Midnight in Chernobyl by Alan Higginbotham. This book was released in 2019. Higginbotham he's a journalist. He worked for the Sunday Telegraph for years as the U.S. correspondent, and now he basically is a freelance dude. And this book is about it. It talks about the history and the disaster of the Chernobyl nuclear disaster in 1986, and the HBO limited series Chernobyl was based on this book. And what's interesting about this book is that, and I think the part that's super scary is that you have this massive superpower in Russia that is faking it until they making it. That's the best way I can describe the Russians and how they do everything. And this is a great example of that. They had this technology, they knew it wasn't the greatest. They built this place. They knew they weren't doing a particularly good job and they were cutting corners at every turn. This was literally going to happen. And
Mhm.
the people that were building this were like, yeah, this is probably going to happen. And this is, to me, what's tough about this is that Russia didn't learn any lessons from this. And you have this country that is controlled by a madman, and he has all of this terrible technology and all of this at his disposal. This disaster could have been so much worse than it was, and it was a disaster, and it could
Mhm.
have been literally a world changer had what they thought was going to happen happened in terms of the meltdown that was happening through the concrete barriers. This could have been much worse, and it's super terrifying. And the fact that it will probably happen again. Well, it has. It happened at Fukushima, but it will probably
Mhm.
happen again in Russia. And like I said before, you have this country that is um, and we've seen it over and over again. We saw it with their space program, we see it in their nuclear program, and we're seeing it in their war machine. So
Mhm.
it's not great. Midnight Chernobyl, super terrifying. And I'm going to talk more about Russia in a minute when I talk about my number 1 book. So anyway, that's my number 5. Number 4, I went with The Shining by Stephen King. And I think this is just one of the best ghost stories there is.
Mhm.
It's such a great ghost story book, and literally one of those books that made me feel chilly as I was reading it. That scene where
Mhm.
they're doing the animal maze, that
Mhm.
the animal thing is fucking terrifying.
Mhm.
And I get so mad when I look at the Stanley Kubrick film because I hate that movie. I fucking hate it.
Mhm.
And I hate it not because it's wait, Alexa's reminding me of something. Oh, hey Alexa, stop. Sorry, I had a reminder. My whole life is Alexa reminders. But anyway, this book was so good and the story was so good and it was so genuinely scary. And I don't like what Stanley Kubrick did with the book or with the movie. He
Mhm.
totally, if I had never read the book, I probably would have liked the movie more
Mhm.
because the movie's genuinely scary. It's a good scare fest, but I get so mad because I feel like he took a story that was amazingly scary and so much dread in that story, and that gets lost in the movie
Mhm.
because he totally changes the tone. It's very much all about Jack Nicholson's interpretation of this character and becomes to me about nothing else,
Mhm.
which is a shame because it's such a great story. We really focus in on the boy and his father, yes, is a big part of the story, but he's not that main part of the story. So I like this book a lot. It scared the poop out of me. And
Mhm.
again, I know when I get scared because I get chilly, like that one scene in The Conjuring in the basement where the match
Uh-huh.
blows out. Ice cold. I went ice cold, ice cold. And I got that when I was reading this book. I'm like, I am ice cold. This scared me so
Mhm.
much.
Yeah.
So yeah, as only Stephen King can do, he is genuinely the master of horror.
Mhm.
So. All right, my number 3 book. I cheated. I comboed. And I comboed with The Handmaid's Tale and Testaments by Margaret Atwood for different reasons. Um, I think I married these stories together, even though she wrote them years apart.
Mhm.
She
Decades.
released Handmaid's Tale in 85, and then
Mhm.
Testaments was what,
19
2016? 2019.
2019.
Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah. And what's interesting is that for me was that when I first read Handmaid's Tale, I was in college, which was super scary for me because the protagonist in that book is a young woman about
Mhm.
my age when I read that. And I reread it again in the spring because I had forgotten some things and I was glad I reread it. And then I read Testaments right after that, just this year. And what I loved about Testaments is that as a 50-year-old woman, one of the main characters in Testaments is a 50 something, 60 something woman, and it really makes you think about your place, like you said
Exactly.
before,
Mhm.
your place. And it was super timely to read Testaments because I don't know where I would be. I think I would like to think that I'm smart enough or maybe could survive by being an ant, but I honestly think I would just be one of the women in the stadium, maybe getting shot, or I don't know, maybe I would have been one of the women in the stadium doing the shooting.
Mhm.
So that's the part that is, like you said, you put yourself in these places. And I think as a woman, and I don't want to make this about, the differences between males and females, but as a woman, um, and I had this conversation with my husband the other day. It's hard to make men understand what it's like to be a woman in a world that is dominated and controlled by men. And the narrative is written by men and has been for years. And though we're trying to change that, it's amazing how fast that can go bad and
Mhm.
how badly you need men as advocates. And that's one of the things that she talks about in The Handmaid's Tale is that when the main character's bank account gets frozen and she no longer has access to her job or her money and her husband is like, "Oh, it's going to be fine. It's going to turn around." And that she didn't have an advocate from her most closest, most loved, person that she trusted until it was too late. And I think that's what is super scary is that we live in this world right now where we are very much under threat. And like if you listen to the rhetoric of certain politicians right now, it's terrifying to be a woman and to hear that rhetoric that if you're not having babies, you don't have value. Or if you're not if you're trying to make choices for your body, you have no value. And that's not great. And so Margaret Atwood is a master of she's like a master of seeing the future. And I'm not just talking
Mhm.
about these books. I'm also talking about, the books like Oryx and Crake and her
Mhm.
Riverland series that
Her Mad
does the
Adam
same
for
thing.
lynching. Mhm.
Yes, because it's the same thing except instead of talking about, women, she's talking about, corporations and their
Mhm.
global influence, which we are living right now. So anyway, these were it was hard for me not to put these at number one because I feel so strongly about these two books, but there's one that's even scarier at the top of my list. Yeah. All right. So The Stand, because The Stand was like Anne, this book just struck me, is it's never gone away. I was at a grocery store when I was like, I don't know, I was 21 maybe, and I
Mhm.
had a handful of stuff, and I was standing there at the checkout line with my armful of stuff because I just came in from one thing and I ended up with like 10 things, and then I'm like, at the checkout counter is the paperback version of the unabridged version of The Stand, and I'm waiting. It's a long line, so I grab in the book and I read the first page, and the first page was so gripping. I just
Mhm.
added it to what I was buying. I'm like, I must have this book right now because I'm like, I must start reading this immediately
Uh-huh.
because it was so gripping. You're just like that first scene in the book. You're like, holy shit, what's happening?
Mhm.
So that's how I started, and I didn't put that book down for the days that it took me because, like I said, it's a thick book. It took me a
Yeah.
couple weeks to read through it, but that's when I was doing my summers at Consumers Energy. So
Mhm.
every break and every lunch and I did not speak. And the guys that worked there made fun of me something awful because I had my face in that book. I'm like, shut up, you guys, you're bothering me. I'm like, shut up.
Shut up.
I'm
You'll be
reading.
you'll be the 90% that's dead.
Yeah. And I was in a movie theater when somebody coughed.
Mhm.
And I was like, and it just that it was shocking how that moment you're just like, is that a cough or is this it? Where you like
Yeah.
your brain immediately, I'm like, how does he do that? And
Yeah.
Stephen King is so good at getting in your head. His gift is not just that he writes things that are super scary. His gift is that he knows what your brain is doing. He
Mhm.
gets into those super deep, dark 3 o'clock in the morning places of your brain and puts those on paper in ways that are so descriptive and so engaging.
Mhm.
It's hard to believe that somebody can write that well.
Yeah.
And yeah, so no, but yeah, that's one of these books that I think about it all the time. Again, the more I've listened and read this book, the more I realize I do not want to survive any of it. I would just like
Mhm.
to just drop dead during the pandemic because I don't think I'm built to live in a world, um, in the post-apocalyptic world. So there you go. All right. I don't know what that says about me.
Mhm.
That's all I know. All right. So my number one book is this is a nonfiction book. It's Deadliest Enemy: Our War Against Killer Germs, and it's by Michael T. Osterholm, who is an epidemiologist, and he is also. Hang on, I got to look at my notes here because there's a bunch of stuff. As far as I'm concerned, that dude is the man. So he's an expert on germs. Where is he? There he is. All right. So Michael T. Osterholm. He is a Regents Professor at the University of Minnesota School of Public Health, and he is also the Director for the Center of Infectious Disease Research and Policy at the University of Minnesota. This book is just jam-packed with stuff that's super interesting and also really scary for many reasons. Number one, this book is such a great history of epidemiology itself. And epidemiology, if you're not familiar with what epidemiology is, it's essentially it's an epidemiologist studies and analyzes diseases, their distribution, their patterns, determines what causes them, what conditions are around that's causing them, how they affect a population, and then also what you should do to stop them from happening. So, Michael T. Osterholm is an expert at these things. Like I said, his resume is thick, and this book is, I believe, it's a must read because he talks about not just the history of pandemics themselves, but um, what epidemiologists do in order to figure out what's happening. And he goes through a chapter where he takes you through three very specific scenarios of what was done. But then he goes on to talk about um, public policy towards uh, epidemics and pandemics. And that's the part that's really scary. And COVID was a great example. He actually does a really excellent forward in his newer version about COVID. And he talks about that how if you don't have policy against, you have nothing. And we saw that in 2020 because and the scary part is that governments know that pandemics are one of the greatest threats to a population, more so than warfare. It's pandemic, it's viruses, and countries know this, but they will refuse to spend money or plan for this. And so you're literally behind before these epidemics even start. It's also the scary, super scary chapter is how much military dollars are going towards biological warfare. And guess who's at the forefront of that? The
Russia.
Russians! Yes. And the Russians are just like throwing shit at the wall to see what will stick. And everybody's like, China, China, China. I'm like, oh no, don't worry about China. I'm sure China's doing this too, as we are. But Russia has been very out front with their policies towards biological warfare. And again, we don't have any sort of response that's ready for this. And this is the thing, if you look at, people talk about the fall of the Roman Empire, this and that. You know what really killed the Romans?
Disease.
Viruses.
I was gonna say
Pandemic. Pandemic is what,
malaria.
yeah, it was. And so the great societies um are not brought down necessarily by they're brought down by natural disaster, and most of those natural disasters are related to pandemic. So that's the thing that scares me is that and now we live in this time where we won't vax anymore because vaccinations are too scary. And yet vaccination is the reason that our lifespan, at the turn of the 19th to 20th century, uh, the average lifespan for an American was 49 years. And 100 years later, we had nearly doubled that lifespan. And it was because of scientific discovery, it was because of electricity, and it was because of vaccination. And we don't now we see vaccination as a threat instead of this thing that has elevated our quality of life, elevated how long we've been able to live. It's saved the lives of millions of, especially kids. When you look at
Hmm.
the polio, epidemic, and we treat it like it's this with disdain, and that just about kills me. And like we live in this terrifying time of scientific denialism of stuff that's really straightforward, like the earth is round.
Yeah, exactly. We went to the
Yeah.
moon. The Earth is
We went to the
round.
moon, the earth
This
is
will keep you
round.
from getting us smallpox.
We don't control hurricanes. Yeah,
Yeah.
I could go on and on. It literally makes my head want to explode, and that's why this book is my number one scariest book because it it should scare you, especially when we look at the way the world works. COVID, like I said, it was our starter pandemic, and which we flunked miserably, and not just because of our medical response, but because of the way we live. He talks about in the book our just-in-time supply chain, which means we don't stockpile anything, we don't store anything, we don't warehouse anything. We we just ship it, ship it, ship it. We get it from overseas, and as a result of that, you know, we're still living the effects of that because of we see the inflation and we're like, well, inflation this, inflation that. Inflation was caused by a supply and demand thing that said when you have a just-in-time supply chain and everything goes sideways in the places that are supplying you what you need, you're not going to get it. And when you do get it, you're going to pay through the nose to get it.
Mhm.
So the ripple effect of pandemics and what they do worldwide aren't just in the fact that pandemics kill people, it's that they disrupt everything else that happens. I mean, if you look at COVID, COVID was not the deadliest pandemic. And, the mortality rate of COVID was about 4%, which is still enough to be super concerning. But look at the ripple effect of the supply chain that happened because of it. If
Mhm.
you look at something like MERS, which is going on in Egypt in 2015, the mortality rate of MERS was about 30%, which is crazy. If that had gotten out, that would have literally driven us into almost a post-apocalyptic sort of world.
Mhm. Yeah.
So
I was gonna
anyway.
say because smallpox is about 40%, and,
Hmm.
that was terrifying for people. So if you have something that's like 30%, I mean, the movie Contagion, it was like 35 to 40%. Look what happened in that movie. And that was civilized compared to what we would probably how we would probably behave. So
Yeah, and you look at
30%
smallpox
brings
ended.
down governments.
Yeah. And,
Mhm.
smallpox brought down civilizations, and
Mhm.
that's, you
Exactly.
know, yeah. So anyway, that's my number one scariest book for so many reasons. And I just think it's a fascinating read because you learn something about epidemiology. And what I learned reading this book is how little I know about any of this. And
Mhm.
that, these are people that are experts in their field that have been studying not just the viruses themselves, but the detective work that it takes. I mean, being an epidemiologist is that not only do you have to be incredibly knowledgeable um, in just the biological processes, but you have to be such a good detective in eliminating what it couldn't be, and
Mhm.
then trying to figure out what it could be beyond that. So Yeah, that's my number one scariest book. So sorry, I talked a lot about that. So there you go.
There you go.
All right. So here's our even more scary books to consider. And why don't you take us through your list first?
Man, do I have a long list.
Totes.
Madam, I'm listening to this right now on Audible. It's a book I discovered last year. It's a novel by Phoebe Wayne, and it's very gothic. It takes place in a girls' school, a very exclusive girls' school in Scotland during the 1990s, about the time that Diane and the prince are divorcing. It is a very and the main character is a classist, so she teaches Latin and the classics at a very exclusive girls' school. So it gives you this great gothic novel incorporated with Greek and Roman mythology and history based on women in Greek mythology and history. So it's so awesome. I love this story so much, and it'll freak you out. The next one is Mexican Gothic by Sylvia Moreno, and I want Guillermo del Toro to make a film from this movie. It's set in Mexico during the 1950s, and again, very gothic. This woman ends up in this scary ass mansion with these weird ass people. Ooh, it's so good. The only
Those are the
good
best. Those are the best kind of books.
yeah, The Only Good Indians, which is by Stephen Graham Jones. And this actually, the main character is a Blackfoot Indian, and the shenanigans that some of his friends got into when they were teenagers, and now the spirit that is taking them out one by one. Oh, this book is fucked up. Man, it's scary fucked up. But Jenny Brothers, I want you to read this because one of the characters is a basketball player. She's a high school basketball player. And the person that wrote this book loves fucking girls of basketball. So it's a great story. It's a really great story. De-Evolution, a firsthand account of the Rainier Sasquatch Massacre by Max
Forgot about that
Brooks.
book. Yeah.
So this is another Max Brooks. He did the World War Z. You will never be able to look at funny Bigfoot paraphernalia the same again, nor will you be ever able to think of predator-prey relationships in the same way again, or how you view nature, or just when some natural disaster happens and it almost brings down your government. So again, another thing I like about this, a lot of this book is written as oral history and diary entries, and I love that. So because what it does is that it gives you this really interesting perspective from lots of different people, and also because they're diary entries, you never get you're allowed to fill in so much of your own information because it never gives you a complete picture. There's always mystery there. So I love that. The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. This was the first book before the Testaments. Sleeping Beauties by Stephen and Owen King. If you are a woman, you will cry reading this book. A Haunting of Hill House. This is a classic by Shirley Jackson. If you want to see where... at the time it was written, it was a modern interpretation of what Gothic novels were. And a lot of haunting stories that you see now in film and TV and books are inspired by The Haunting of Hill House. So this, You Like It Darker. This is the newest set of short stories by Stephen King. I just read this because I always like to read a set of scary short stories during my spooky time. I actually finished this before October because I just couldn't wait. So this is the newest one by Stephen King. Parable of the Sower by Octavia Butler. I've talked about this actually several times this year already because I think this book is awesome. But if you are into dystopian fiction, this will do it for you. The Last House on Needless Street. This is a very, very hard book to read. It's long. It's a very slow burn, and it will break your heart. I will give you this. It has a positive ending. So if you delve into this, it will be hard on you, but know that you will. It has a positive ending. I'm just going to because I almost didn't finish it because it's such a hard book to read, but it's a very, very interesting perspective on mental illness. The Wishing Pool and Other Stories. This was my go-to last year for my haunted short stories. Really fun. Actually, because of this book, I ended up reading Parable of the Sower, because one of the stories talks about all these stories that you should read instead of Stephen King, and that was one of them. So it took me to other stories. It was that awesome. Salem's Lot by Stephen King. If you like vampire stories, this one will freak you out.
It's a good one. It's the best
Yeah,
one, I think.
I think so too. Ghostly. This is a compilation I'm reading by Audrey Niffinger. Okay. She wrote the Time Traveler's Wife.
Okay, yeah.
She has most of this is a compilation of older ghost stories. And I've been enjoying the older ghost stories. Like the first one is Edgar Allan Poe's story, The Black Cat. So and then she has one of her own stories in it. I was not a big fan of her story, but I am really enjoying the other ghost stories in it. Of course, The Shining by Stephen King. If you want an excellent version of, if you want Gothic, you got to read Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. I am amazed at how many people, like in films, they'll like reference Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, and actually what they're referencing is the movie. And I just want to like scream and like, flip a table. I'm like, that's not the book, that's the movie. So if you want
Triggered.
to read, yeah, triggered. If you want to read an excellent book, Frankenstein's, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, it's exceptionally good, and it will break your heart a little bit. Only Ever Yours. This is another super hard book, and unlike the Last House on Needless Street, this does not have a positive ending.
Ooh.
This is a young adult book. The author is English. It is fucked up, and I can't get it out of my head, Jenny Brothers. I cannot get it out. I go back to it a couple times a year, and it's a short book. So like I said, it's young adult. It's woof, woof.
Yeah.
Talk
Yeesh.
about a
Okay.
book that
Okay.
makes you wonder your place in it.
Ugh.
And as I
Yeah.
was reading, the
Yep.
first time I was reading it, I was like, this has no happy ending. There's nothing that can happen in this book that will allow the main character to have her happy ending. And it doesn't. But it is so relevant and so on point. It's kind of like, some of your nonfiction that you chose, Jenny. It's
Mm.
so real. And I see it now all the time when I see media directed at young women. And it
Ooh.
brings me back to this book all the time. I'm like, oh, it's only ever yours. This is exactly what this is what happens when we take the media, what we direct at young women, and we distill it to its most evil
Yes.
point.
We have a comment.
I wouldn't necessarily, I would recommend it, but just know what you're getting yourself into. So
Tina Albright, Tina, I don't know how to pronounce your last name. Trankita. You'll have to tell me. Is with us. Sorry, Tina. And she says Anne's reaction and voice with the table flipping is scary movie scene in itself. Oh, girl, you don't even know.
you
So,
don't even know. You don't even
yep.
know.
So,
Yeah. So yeah.
Tina, thank you for being with us. We love you.
Mhm. So those are that's my highly recommended list. I would recommend every book on this list. Some of them are not easy reads, but that is the point, I think, of horror, is that they give us reality. They give us a perspective of reality that is sometimes better than it's more thought-provoking than reality itself. It's easy to dismiss reality as you're too busy. These books are difficult to dismiss.
Got it.
Hmm.
Uh, Trankita, thank you, Tina.
Hmm.
I won't make that mistake again. I got
I
it.
probably
That's okay. I won't.
I'll try not to.
Again, so glad you are with us. Well, my list is for those of you that may not have already realized this, Anne is the more literary of the two of us.
I
Um,
like books. Books are my
yeah,
favorite.
Anne likes books, and she has always been. I read and reads. Okay. So for me, Silence of the Lambs, it's a great book. The
Mhm.
movie gets all the attention, but the book is killer good.
Yeah, book is very good.
Salem's Lot. Salem's Lot's cool because Stephen King draws from other. He goes back to this well a
Mhm,
couple of times in his work
mhm.
and his short stories, which I love that about his work.
Yeah.
It by Stephen King, which I
Mhm.
reread it this summer. It hasn't aged well. I
It
still
has
like
not.
it. It is not,
Mhm.
but it is not aged well as far as his books go. World War Z, which is again such a sweet book. Stephen King, I like a lot of what I love most about Stephen King are his shorts, and
Mhm.
he has so much work that he has done. His well of works is like Pacific Ocean deep as far as
Mhm.
what he's done through his career. He never stops writing. He never not writes, you know, and his short stories are a great introduction. If you're not familiar with Stephen King, if you want to dip a toe, highly recommend his anthologies and his books of short stories.
Mhm.
The story Apt Pupil, um, which is to me one of the deepest, darkest, most horrifying stories ever written.
Mhm.
Stephen King. That's from Different Seasons, which is a short book. Also, it's funny. Th- Different Seasons is also where Shawshank Redemption comes from. The
Yeah.
story Rita Hayworth and the Shawshank Redemption came
Mhm.
from that particular book. And of course, Night Shift by Stephen King, another book of short stories. My three favorites out of that: Strawberry Spring, Jerusalem's Lot, and One for the Road. And
Oof.
again, there's that Salem's Lot. So yeah,
Mhm.
agreed, Tina. Jerusalem's Lot scared the crap out of me. Yeah,
Mhm.
it's again, it's gothic
Yeah.
and it's gross and
Mhm.
in the way that only if you've ever been out east. Joe described this when he was working in Maine about 10 years ago, that the eastern United States is haunted as fuck. And that's a
Mhm.
great way to describe it. And that story lends itself to that haunted as fuck thing that's going
Mhm.
on out east. So
It's
so One for
old.
the Road, it is. So you have Salem's Lot, which is of course about vampires, Jerusalem's Lot, which draws like the history of Salem's Lot, and then you have
Mhm.
One for the Road, which is also a Salem's Lot story. It's another
Mhm.
vampire story about a family that gets, yeah, yeah, it's so
Don't go
great.
there. Don't do it.
Do not drive through there in a blizzard. There you
Mhm.
go. So
Yeah.
those are, like I said, my list is of course much shorter, but and I should have put Devolution on there because that is such a great.
Mhm.
That's the Sasquatch story, and yeah, those beef jerky commercials with the Sasquatch are less
Mhm.
funny when you think of yourself getting ragdolled by that thing, you know?
Well, the thing is, Jenny, when you recommended that book to me, I was like, "Oh, I'm not interested in a Bigfoot movie or Bigfoot book." But it was Max Brooks. I was like, I
Yeah,
loved World War Z, and I was like, I'm going to give this a try because it's a Max Brooks. And I literally read it in 3 days. Could not
it
put it
was
down.
so good.
God, it was
Yeah,
so
just
good.
great.
Hmm.
Just a great book. Good story.
Yeah.
And again, it has volcanoes in it too. I'm like, two things I love, you know, fiction and volcanoes, and that's
Yeah.
there you go. So I'm easy to please. All
Hmm.
right. Well, here we are coming up on an hour. Woo! Good
Woof.
work.
So
You
many
guys did
books.
it. You have spent nearly an hour with us as we have digested. You've got work to do, viewing and listening audience. Find some books. And I will say that one of the things I love is I do love me some audiobook, and that
Hmm.
is one of the things that has been a game changer for me as far as upping my reading quota is that I'm always like doing things, so it's nice to be able to plug in and mow my lawn and listen to a book and clean my house and
Hmm.
listen to a book and drive and listen to a book, and that's one of the things I love. So yay.
Yeah.
You don't necessarily have to do Audible. There are public library versions
Hmm.
that you can do for free. So just know that you don't necessarily have to spend money on an Audible membership. You can, there's many free versions that you can do, especially through your public library. So check that out.
Hmm.
But thank you for spending an hour or so with us learning things about stuff. This week you learned about our spooktacular reading lists. Ann and I did our top 5 amongst other things. And remember, we want to hear from you. We loved hearing from Tina today during the show.
Thank you,
We
Tina.
want to hear from you. Answer our poll questions. Give us your questions, concerns, comments, and confessions.
Confessions. So
Confessions.
many confessions. You heard Jenny and I confessing why we ask questions.
Yes, we do. Yes, and we
Mhm.
have different motivations for that. So
Very different.
very different. So, yes. Remember, you can support the Brothers Sisters for free. Like, subscribe, follow, leave us a review on Spotify, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music. Put the word out, you guys. Share with your friends and family that you should listen to these two nerds talk about stuff because
Exactly.
that's what we do now. I'm like, why not us? Why
Why
not
not?
us? Why not?
Why
Why
not?
not? So there you go. Join us next week. Our Spook Fest, our Spooktacular Spooktober continues. This week, Anna's going to talk about her passion project, which is bats.
Bats, not the
Bats.
baseball equipment, the
No,
mammals.
not the Louisville Slugger type. Nope.
Mm-mm.
She's going to talk about the mammal, the flying mammal, the
Mhm.
bat.
Mhm.
And because it's October and we continue our month-long Halloween celebration by talking about bats,
Uh-huh.
there you go.
There you go.
I'm gonna start up our music and take
Oh,
us
yeah.
out. Wait,
Awesome,
wait.
Jenny Brothers.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There it is. There it is. I'm gonna take that out right there. That's right. There we are. Uh, so until next week, you guys, I am Janice Brothers, and with me is my
And
sister
brothers. And brothers.
with her and brothers with her little cat thing, whatever that is. That's okay.
It's a Day of the Dead cat.
The Day of the Dead cat that she got at CBS because for whatever reason, drugstores have the best stuff.
Yeah, you do.
We want you to get out there, do something smart, do something dumb, do something fun. We are out of here.
Bye.